everyone. It's Marc Sabatella from Mastering MuseScore.
Muting my
Speaker
for there.
for there,
And
and
I'm hearing
I'm
echo.
hearing echo, and I know why. So I still just don't have this all down, but that's okay. That is okay.
This is the Music
This is
Master
the
Class.
Music Master Class. So,
is the
sound?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, okay.
What
is going on?
Audio
output still choppy.
And
yeah, I hear the echo too.
I swear.
I
did all
my tests. I did everything right. I swear I did.
All right.
All right. No.
Huh?
What am I hearing?
One of those days. Okay. Whoa, that's still echoing.
Even though the mixer's off. Microphones were on. 2 microphones were on. That should be better. Sorry about that. I have a checklist, and I didn't do the last thing on it. That was my problem. All right, everyone. So here we are, and the question is, is the sound any better from MuseScore? So let me know if the sound's better from MuseScore, because that would be good to know. But okay, let me tell you some of the things that we're going to talk about today. And if we got good sound from MuseScore, great. And if I'm not going to get good sound from MuseScore, we will live. But I have reason to think that good things might be happening now. So definitely let me know. My settings are all good. So, all right. So, the first thing that I want to do is a follow-up on something from the musicianship workshop where I posted a lesson earlier and went through some things. And this involved the cello suite that Steiner had. Wait a minute, was it Steiner? Yeah, I think it was you. Had suggested that we talk about some. And I did this analysis of the first few bars. And then someone pointed out that, I should listen. Yeah, that's fine. Someone pointed out that there was a typo in the actual edition that I was working from, and this had real bearing on some of the things that I talked about. So let me revisit that. I'm going to play what. Well, you all haven't let me know if MuseScore's playback was sounding good for you all or not. Is this good? Okay, that's what I want to play up to. Good. Glad the sound's better now. The issue had to do with this note right here. This is apparently not the right note. And I commented on this specifically in the lesson, saying, man, that note caught me by surprise, that I was expecting an E. And I wasn't saying I was expecting an E because I've heard this song so many times before and I remember that note was an E. No, I mean, I've heard the song many times, of course, but it's not like I remember every single note from it. So it wasn't a question of what I was expecting based on prior knowledge. It was based on the following. This measure right here, and then that's what I expected. I expected G, F sharp, E. I expected this to be an E. Not that E, but this E. I expected that just based on this basic line here. And it was okay that the B wasn't repeated. He had to get that bass note in there. But I expected dum, 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 I expected it to go down to E. And then I made an excuse for Bach. I said, well, maybe he didn't resolve it right away. Because this G going down to F sharp, you kind of expect it to go down to E. And he did eventually go down to E, and so that was what I said. Oh, Bach must have just decided to hold off on that. He wanted to hold the original pattern a little longer, where that leap up was an octave. I don't know. I made up some excuse for him. But all the time I'm thinking, man, if I had written this piece, I would have put an E there. And so I was really pleasantly surprised when someone pointed out, I think it was Bernhard, pointed out that, in fact, that is just wrong, and that the published sheet music, if you go back and look at, I looked at several editions on IMS LP and other versions, and they all have the E. That there might be some published edition that has the G there. There might be some handwritten manuscript of Bach's that has a G, but one of the handwritten manuscripts definitely has an E. So, in any case, what does this tell me? What this tells me is that this level of understanding that I am constantly striving for us to have, it goes beyond helping you, have theory knowledge to show off. It goes beyond having theory knowledge to help you compose your own music. It goes beyond having theory knowledge to help you recognize patterns that will help you memorize. It also might help you spot mistakes. And so I didn't trust that there was a mistake in this, because other than that, this seemed to be a good transcription, and the account that it came from mostly had good transcriptions, and it said I don't know. I believed what I saw on MuseScore.com. And so there's a lesson for you. Random people posting to MuseScore.com, maybe their stuff is good, maybe it's not. This wasn't a random account. It was someone who does a lot of IMSLP transcriptions, and they mostly seem pretty good to me, but I guess I've never picked through them in that much detail. So anyhow, that's the story. So the reason this came up was, so first Steinar had mentioned that just talking about this piece from an understanding perspective, but also wanting to get inside this piece. So I'm going to encourage people to continue the analysis that I started, to continue to go through and see what else is happening in the piece. But also, beyond that, there was a separate discussion about memorization and the problems that come up trying to memorize piano music specifically, and that, some of the harmonic information can be helpful, but the sheer number of notes makes it more complicated. And so I decided to pick on this example as one. Well, it's not a piano piece, but it still has all the harmonic information that we might need, right? If you're playing an ordinary cello piece that's designed to have piano accompaniment, then you don't get all the harmonic information right there in the cello part. But because this is an unaccompanied cello piece, that harmonic information is there, and so we can make use of it. So definitely going to encourage people to be looking at this piece or looking at other pieces. So I had asked people if you had pieces that you were working on memorization-wise to post links, and I don't think I've seen any yet. If I have, I've missed them, and I'm sorry. Someone, if you would like, go ahead and post some links now. You can post here in the chat, and then I can try to open them, and we can talk about what's going on in there. Meanwhile, Steinar, if you want to come up and just say a few words and also tell me if I'm coming close to saying your name the way you would prefer it said, I will see if you want to come on for a few minutes, and then otherwise, after that, we will go on and take a look at just some of other music that people have posted. So yeah, if you're interested in talking any further about the analysis on this piece, go for it. So he's coming on board. Hello, are you there yet? I hear you. Yes.
Okay. Well, I have my echo still.
You do still have echo?
Yeah.
All right, let me try something, because after I did that last little fiddly-dee thing that I did, that might have caused echo to come back. Okay, how about now?
Yeah. Can you still hear me? There's no echo for me, at least now.
Good. All right, good. So yeah, go ahead and talk a little bit about what you have in mind, what you're wondering about, what you're trying to do, and we can go from there.
Yeah. The reason I made this suggestion about the cello sheet, actually it was the minuet, not the prelude.
Okay.
My intention was to try to make an arrangement for my brass quintet. And like you said, Mark, this is a solo piece, so if you're doing an arrangement, you may add something. But basically what I wanted to do was to kind of course, add some chords for maybe the bass instruments in the brass quintet, trombone and tuba, and then let the two trumpets and horn kind of switch between playing the melody, and then maybe add some counter melodic phrases on top of the existing melody. That was my intention.
Gotcha. So yeah, what you're doing goes beyond just what we call a transcription, where you just adapt the piece exactly as is for another instrument. But because there is basically no brass instrument that would be able to play this piece reasonably, scoring it for an ensemble definitely means changing some things up, adding fuller, giving people more parts to play, basically, than is here.
Yeah, that's right.
And so, in doing this, I mean, how faithful do you want to stay to it? I mean, are you looking to be creative in your addition of other things, or are you trying to do it in a way that will essentially fool people into thinking that you did nothing?
I haven't thought about that yet, but I think I will try to keep the melody in one of the, like I said, in one of the two trumpet voices, or in the horn, maybe. And as for the two minuets in cello sheet number 1, it's definitely playable by both trumpets and horn. The melody, so that won't be a problem. Maybe we have to choose another key than the original key, but that's another topic.
Right.
So,
and now when you say the melody, you're kind of excluding things like, because this arpeggio there, that opening arpeggio would be very difficult for any brass instrument to pull off. But I assume you're considering the melody starting on the B?
No, I don't think that arpeggio is really difficult to play on trumpet. I do it every day.
All right. Well, that's good to know then.
Yeah. So and I think for horn as well, maybe will not sound that good on trombone, but on the trumpet and horn, that will be playable.
All right.
Yeah.
I would say there's a term that I use. I can't remember if I used it in the newsletter, of a compound melody, and in some sense, that is what this is. I would claim, in some sense, the melody really starts on the B, and that this is Bach's way of saying, hey, I want the cello to be able to play a bass part and the melody, and kind of flip back and forth. Boom, and then is the melody, and those first two notes are arguably not part of the melody. Arguably, it's, or maybe even the first three notes, And so if you're looking to separate things out that way, you could start to look at it that way. Which of the notes in here is Bach writing the accompaniment into the cello part, and which are part of the main melody? That's going to be an interesting decision for you to make along the way, I think.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. I haven't thought about that, but I always looked at those three first notes as part of the melody.
Yeah, and because we hear it as only one instrument, that's going to be a common thing. We're going to assume the whole thing is the melody. But if you're trying to take it and arrange it for multiple instruments, I'm saying that could be a very natural way to do the split. Let the horn go, and then let the trumpet go. And let that be a split between instruments there, or even have be a pyramid between trombone, horn, and a trumpet. Boom,
Yeah.
ding, ding, and then have just the solo trumpet start after that. That kind of thing would allow you to not need to add much at all to this, be pretty faithful to what's there, and yet feel like you're taking advantage of the ensemble.
I
That
agree.
could be an interesting approach.
Same in the fifth bar.
Yeah,
can
and
change
same in the
split.
fifth bar. Obviously, with this chord happens too. There's probably a lot of measures that start off that way. Start off with a arpeggio, and this one is a downward arpeggio. You'd have to make some decisions about things like that. But I don't know. I think there's room for exploration of that idea. And then maybe that turns out to be the way to do it, and maybe it turns out not to be.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say to the extent that you can separate this thing out and not assume it's all one melody, but that it really is indicating multiple parts that Bach has kind of layered together, that's probably going to be a good way of going about it. And then you might still say, well, that's not enough for 4 people to do. I'm gonna give them some additional notes, if you do make this a pyramid here for 3 instruments, then you might consider, well, what are they going to do during that second measure? You might want to give them a chord, a C chord or an A minor chord or whatever this chord is,
I think so.
to a D chord,
Yeah.
and let that happen, and let it not, because we don't hear it in the original, don't make it be an actual whole note or dotted half note, but just be a quarter note pulse, and then the next measure have it be just a pulse. And that's a common thing that's done with strings, to have strings just go or with brass for that matter, in an orchestral setting when you want to emphasize a chord but we don't really want to hear it sustain because it's too much, you do what's called a pulse, just a quarter note.
Yeah, many good suggestions there. So I think I will start on this in 1 week or 2 weeks. So when
great.
I'm finished, I can post it so we can take a look at it.
Great. I look forward to seeing what you come up with. Any other? I haven't looked at the minuet. I've heard it, but I haven't looked at it here. Any specific questions or anything about it that we can talk about here?
No, not really. There's a minuet number 2 also, which goes in minor. This is in major.
In the same suite?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, there it is. Yeah. Okay. Oh yeah, that one. Okay, yeah. It's like I didn't recognize it until I played it. Sometimes I can just look at it and say, "Oh yeah, I know that one," but this one I had to play the first few notes of it to say.
So both these two are in my book, and I use them for warm up nearly every day. So.
I see. Nice. Very nice. But you said transposed into different keys.
Yes.
Yeah.
To C
yeah,
major.
That's pretty common to need to do that because, I don't know what the cello was like in Bach's day, if it was exactly the same as this or if it was really a viola da gamba that he was writing for. That was a slightly different instrument. But in any case, it's totally to be expected that if you are going to adapt it for other instruments, you'll probably have to change the range, change the key to fit the range of the instrument better, as well as change the octave, of course.
Yeah. Yes, but thank you for the advice.
Sure. All right. Well, thanks. Any final comments or questions or anything before I move on and look at some other music?
Not from me.
Okay. Well, thank you very much and thanks for kind of starting the ball rolling on this particular discussion here, and I look forward to seeing what comes of it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, I just saw a comment from Malou in here about simplifying some things where the incessant 16th notes is too much. Yeah, and that it could be you're talking about something slightly different, but I'm sure it could well be a similar kind of idea where there's certain things that on one instrument. Okay, so here's a trivial example. That kind of pattern for piano takes no brain power, no finger power. You can do it. It's light. It can stay out of the way. Right? That's really, really easy. Taking this pattern and arranging it for wind instruments, you'll never get that. You'll never get that. You can ask wind instruments to do this, but it's not going to have that same lightness. And if you try to say, oh, I'm going to give one instrument the C, another instrument the G, another instrument the E, it'll never sound as smooth because they won't be able to time it as well. There's certain things that are just better suited for some. Now, stringed instruments can typically do those kinds of arpeggiation patterns a little more easily. I'm not saying winds can't do it. I'm saying it has a different feel. And also the fact that on piano, the note starts dying away right away, and on other instruments, it keeps sustaining. I think I demonstrated that with respect to organ recently. That also is a consideration. So yeah, there's all sorts of considerations like this where something that just feels so natural for one instrument might feel very not natural for another. All right, I'm going to flip over and start looking at some other things here. So I want to play one of David Griffith's, he's in the Counterpoint course, and I want to play you this Canon that he put together and talk a little bit about Canon, and then we'll move on and look at a little bit of a fugue. So first of all, David, are you here as well? Yes, I will invite you to come on if you like, and we'll talk about this. But I'll tell you what, I mean, creating a canon is hard. It's hard if you want it to be any good, I should say. It's easy to create boring canons. Creating interesting canons is a hard thing. And I think this is really well done, and there's some really nice things about it that I want to talk about. So, David, are you with us?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Beautiful. Yeah. So, I picked this one. I know you posted a couple different things. I don't know why I picked this one. I just did. Is that okay with you to talk about this one a little bit?
Yeah.
Great. So, yeah, so the setup that I want to give for people who aren't aware is that in the Counterpoint course, I talk about a lot of different things, but Canon is like one big section of the course. And I realized when I was creating that section of the course that there was not a lot of really good information out there on how to create canons. There's a lot of really simplistic information on how to create canons. And so most books on Counterpoint just gloss over it and then move right on to talking about fugues. And then when you actually look at things like, Bach canons or other canons, you realize how complex they can be. And I am not talking about Pachelbel canon. That's a simplistic one by the measure that I am talking about. But the Bach canons are incredibly complex, as are a whole lot of others. And when you really dig into what's involved in creating them, it's actually mind-blowing. And I spent a week just totally immersing myself in learning some of these historic techniques that don't get taught much, and then made an effort to put that into my course. And it's amazingly gratifying when I see someone like David come along and actually write something in this style and have it work and go, yeah, it really is possible to learn this stuff. It's possible to teach this stuff. It's possible for other people to learn it and really create some amazing music. So that's my setup. David, what do you want to tell us about this canon here?
Well, I'd like to follow the rules as faithfully as I could. I tried in this one to get some thirds going on, and I think that adds to the kind of the quality. I think of the way it sounds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for people who don't know also the basics of a canon, what we're going to have is one voice that's basically the leader. Dum, doo, 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 dum. That's this voice, that tenor voice, which I was singing an octave too low. And then we have the follower. Ba, doo, doo, da, doo, doo, da, doo, dum. It's essentially the same the same melody, but in this case, it's an octave and a fourth higher. And it's following the same pattern of intervals, but maybe with some adjustments, like here, going down from that C to the B flat is a whole step. Going down from this F to the E is a half step. And these sorts of adjustments to stay within the key or to allow you to modulate where you want, that's where part of the creativity comes in here. So David's done all the sort of expected sorts of things you're going to expect to do some of those things. Realistically, you probably didn't need that B flat right off the bat, but I love it. I love that it goes to F right away and then comes to D minor and goes to the little modulations that happen in here are just really beautiful. Did you like start off? I don't know. Did the B flat was there ever a time when you were thinking it wasn't going to be a B flat?
I think that came fairly early on.
Yeah.
Yeah, tried to get that suspension thing there.
Gotcha. Yeah, because I mean, if you put a B natural in there, you could have a suspension if you wanted, but then you would have needed probably an F sharp underneath this to be a perfect fourth, and that would have been its own different thing, and that F on top would have sounded stupid. So yeah, there's a lot of, and that's the other thing that I need to point out about this. I mentioned the tenor voice is the leader, and then the soprano voice here is the follower. The bass voice is free, right? It is just something you get to add later to fill out the harmonies. And sometimes when you're writing a canon like this with a free bass, you can kind of be thinking about the bass while you write the canon, but you can totally just wait until you're all done and then plug things in. Were you at all thinking about the bass while writing the canon, or was it totally after the fact?
A bit of both, I think. I think some was added afterwards, but I do play the bass, so kind of second nature to me to think about
Yeah.
the bass part generally as I was doing other things as well, probably.
All right, so I'm just going to, now that we've talked about it a little bit, any last, well, not last, but further thoughts before I just hit the play button on this?
Yeah, I was saying about the thirds.
Yeah.
As it plays, I think you'll hear some of the harmonies are closer and some are more open, and I think that kind of alternation between close and open harmonies, I think, because they tend to switch around, I think it kind of reinforces them when they do happen.
Right. And now, literally speaking, your soprano voice is always more than an octave above that tenor. So realistically, that soprano voice could come down an octave if it wanted to. And then, and I don't think you would actually have any crossing at all. That could literally be true. But I'm going to play it as is. Because then you'd have some voicings that are even closer. But yeah, the spacing between the bass and the tenor, obviously you've got thirds.
I think I said in the posting that when I was setting this up, I originally thought that I would kind of move down the stave as I went by a couple of successional changes, and then in the end I didn't. I sort of went up as well as down. That was originally why I started.
Yes,
so
yeah,
high.
You did mention about the octave, and I had forgotten about that. But yeah,
you're right. I've not actually tried bringing it back down an octave. But
we'll listen to it both ways and get some comments from people. Okay. So here it is as is. This piece could stand alone as is, or it could obviously, with Canon, you just keep going until you're done. There's not like a set form of a development and all this stuff. No, you just keep going until you feel like stopping, and man, that is really good. I'm going to try it with that top voice taken down an octave, just for fun, okay? Here it is. Works just as well to me. Interested in anyone else's opinion on that, and also if we're going to do this, maybe the whole thing could go up a couple of steps, perhaps. What did you think hearing that, David?
Yeah, I think I preferred the higher octave. I just remembered about the minor chords I put in as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like those.
So yeah, and I think I overall probably prefer the higher version, but I think part of it had to do with the key, and that overall things were a little muddy with the soprano taken down, which is why I wondered if the whole thing went up a fourth after that, if it would make us feel different. But I don't want to obsess about that. But yeah, so the things that I really like, I mean, it's the process of doing this that I laid out is it's quite a process, right? Where you're picking target notes and you say, hey, I want to have this C resolve to this A, because there's certain intervals. If you're going to have a follower a fourth above, then the leader from measure to measure has its main note go either down a third or up a step, and there's all these different things that allow the canon to work, and that you don't just write any old melody you want and then hope for the best when you do the follower. If you plan your leader well, when you implement the follower on top of it, the intervals will work out well. And that was mind-blowing to me to realize that was the case. So I assume that you did that. I see your core notes going down by thirds,
yeah,
and then going up a step, but a chromatically altered step, and then going up a step, and then going down a third, and then here it's up a step, but maybe a chromatically altered thing, and as a result, you have a fourth against it. That's what happens when you don't do. If you do this thing, that I'm talking about, then every time the leader goes down by a third or up a step, when you hear that against the follower, it's going to form a third or a sixth and sound pretty. So we get to hear a sixth here. We get to hear a sixth there. We get to hear a third here. And we get to hear a third here, except it's offset rhythmically, but that's fine. And then we get to hear a sixth here. This is where we get a fourth, and that happens specifically because the leader did not do that thing of either going down a third or up a step. So, curious, was this a case of, I see the cadence coming up, and I'm going to start just aiming for the cadence?
Yeah, that's right. And I wanted to make that a minor chord as well there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's right. Generally, I did follow the pattern of down a third or up a tone, and then I think towards the end, try to align it to end on the eighth bar.
Right. Yeah, and that like totally works in that way. And just so that people can see, I mean, you'd have to go through the whole lessons to really totally get this, but since I'm bringing it up, I will just mention, yeah, if this F, instead of going to F sharp, which is essentially the same pitch, just chromatically altered, if it had gone up to G, up a step, now we have a third between the top two voices. Or if instead of F, it had gone down a third, we would have a sixth between the voices B to D. So that pattern, anytime the follower is a fourth above, that rule will follow. If the leader goes from measure to measure, down a third or up a step, you always get these consonances. And then you do all these fancy things like suspensions and other stuff to give you other opportunities. But by choosing to have the F sharp there, it means that we have a fourth. Now, the comment that I gave in the lesson, or in my comment when you posted this, is this sounds, I don't know what the word is, open, right? It's very non-30, right? After all the thirds you've had everywhere else, that sound there, we are moving from this chord here, we're moving from basically a second inversion F chord to a B minor chord in root position that doesn't have the third at first. And that definitely is a, I don't know how to, it's an extreme type of sound as far as like not being as smoothly connected thirds and everywhere as everywhere else. And this is what made me wonder if you change this to a D. Right on the beat and just let that be the D, if that's going to sound any different. Yeah, I don't know if I like that any better, but I think part of the thing also is it's really unusual to have that root motion from F to B like that. And no matter how you voice it, it's unusual. I like unusual root motion, so that's definitely not a criticism, but it does come off as more romantic era, more extreme modulation. So when you mentioned that you wanted to get that minor 2 chord in there, any other, I don't know, thoughts about how that came about, what you were thinking about in there?
Well, from the other courses, a 251 is
yeah.
Well, I say standard finish, but a common finish, which gives some sort of completion, I think, to the cadence.
So if I were going to like play with this a little bit, because normally it's really risky to play with anything in a Canon, because anything you change in one voice, you got to change in the other voice a measure later. And then you're open a can of worms. But as we're getting to the cadence, the imitation is stopping anyhow, so I can just play around. I'm going to play around a little bit just to show some things. Like, to me, going from F major to B minor is, in a sense, they both come from the key of A minor. But they're rarely used in juxtaposition like that. And I say rarely because I don't hear it very often. Maybe someone would find examples of it. That more typically, if we're going to go from this chord to a 2 chord, it would keep the F. And so I'm going to try that. I'm going to keep the F, and now definitely I need the D. And then it's going to go to, well, I'm playing it in 4 voices, but yeah, so this, I wonder if I really want that repeated F. I'm going to cheat. So if I wasn't worried about imitation, that would probably be something that I might try to do that keeps these chords a little more related. And then the 2 would be a half diminished as opposed to a minor chord. And that would be a little more typical in minor keys. But I like the sound. I like that sound. It's just a little unexpected. Do you have a particular frame of reference for that, like using an actual minor 2 chord as opposed to half diminished in this context?
Not really. I quite like the double figure, two quavers, crotchet.
Yeah,
Kind
and
of
having
gives
that
some
quarter note
symmetry.
there was a step in the wrong direction as far as that goes, because then all the motion stopped. So I definitely would have needed to get the eighth notes involved somewhere if I did that. But I guess one reason why an F triad going to a B minor triad is a little unexpected is again, they're not normally, like that F sharp is sort of in the key of A minor if we, think about melodic minor and all, but just typically it doesn't get placed in immediate juxtaposition with the F chord like that for, I guess because it feels like you're coming from, F major feels like you're coming from a key that maybe has a flat in it, B flat, and B minor feels like it's coming from a key that's got lots of sharps in it. And so it feels like they are more distantly related than they are. To me, that's part of the charm of it. So I'm
beginner's luck, perhaps.
Yeah, I'm in favor of the sound, but it definitely is a noteworthy sound. The only thing that's it's the open fifth there that's the less. So I wonder if I actually did this D, E, F like that. That sounds a little smoother, maybe. I like, I'm usually not a fan of open fifths, and this puts me sort of at odds with most of the Renaissance because they use open fifths all the time. But by the time you get to Baroque style music and later, we usually try to avoid those sort of open fifths in strong positions like this, especially when there's a prominent thing going on harmonically. So it made it stand out that much more as being interesting. Anytime I hear something like that, the thing I'm always drawn to is like movie score music and like Danny Elfman and all these other composers who use triads moving in interesting ways. And I think of that as part of that language, even though I've never really analyzed it. But anyhow, that's one observation I have. But yeah, I really like, I'm just going to play it again as it is because I just really like it. But this little, tonicization going into the F chord, and then a nice tonicization going to the D minor, and another nice tonicization coming, or whatever, going to the original key of A minor. The way it kind of moves through these keys very naturally is really well done.
Yeah, I did have in mind some of the tonizations you mentioned. Yeah, I thought they might be useful.
They work beautifully. All right, I'm just because it's so nice, I just want to hear it again. Any other comments you want to make before I play it again and we move on?
Not really, no.
All right, let's just hear it one more time. Oh, God, that's nice. Yeah, it's just it's isn't it a nice feeling to be able to write something like that?
It is good, yeah.
That's it just brings like a big smile to my face after, you go through all this pain and effort and calculations of doing this stuff, and then you hear it like, wow, that sounds like something. It's like so anyhow, really great job.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, well, thanks for joining us here. And I will be seeing you around as you post more stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So I had mentioned Fugue before, and I don't know if Humble, you're going to be available to come online. That's never happened before, but the invitation is there, and I know you're usually in a co-working space or something. But I do want to take a look. You've got two different things here that could be worth talking about, but I want to just talk about this fugue simply because we were just talking about canons, and I mentioned that fugues are sort of the next step. There's a couple other things that you've posted, right? You've got this piece here, but since we're talking about counterpoint, I'm going to talk about this. And I'm going to go ahead and take a look at the chat here and just hit the play on this. So the first thing that I was going to say before I read comments about it or anything was, yeah, there's something weird going on rhythmically. And then that I saw in your comments that that was the idea. So let's hear it and see what's happening rhythmically and what it means. All right. So, yeah, really, really nice. And so, yeah, you've got a recording of it. And yeah, I should be hearing your recordings. But it's so much easier for me to just do stuff within MuseScore. So I hope that's okay. But yeah, I realize you're usually working and not able to come on, and that's fine. So yeah, let me flip over to where your comment. So it's really, really nice fugue, and it is a fugue in form. It's unusual to have a fugue of only two voices, and I think that's come up before, but it doesn't invalidate it from being a fugue. We've talked about what is the definition of a fugue as compared to an invention or anything else, and it's not always a cut and dried thing, so I'm not going to stress about whether it specifically is more of a fugue than anything else. It's clearly in that basic idea. Yeah, the idea of the two voices, I don't have an opinion on it. There's nothing wrong with pieces in two voices, and if you want to follow a fugue form with it, that's fine. So, this comment of Jim's is spot on. This is the thing I was going to mention. The beaming, the way it's written at the beginning, is what threw me off too. Because I'm like, well, wait a minute. He's changing the rhythm around. This is how it should be written. Ba-do-dum, ba-do-dum, ba-do-dum. That's what should be written. And so what happens is, if you write something as a pickup, this is a shortened measure, right? So this measure only has 2.5 beats, like you deleted the leading rests from it. MuseScore doesn't understand, if you have a shortened measure like that, if that is meant to indicate the first few beats of a measure or the last few beats of a measure. It should be smart enough to say, hey, at the beginning of a score, it's probably a pickup, and I'm going to interpret it that way. But in any case, its default beaming rules are not going to be correct. So yes, in order to write this way, you should change the beaming and also change... No, I guess the rest would be okay. But here's my advice. Don't shorten the measure. This doesn't feel like a pickup. It just doesn't. It feels like a full measure that just doesn't start on beat 1. So I think I would have just left it as 4 full beats and let it start with a beat and a half of rest. I think that's what I would have done in doing this. Is that a common thing to do? I don't know, but it doesn't have to be the best way to do it. That's what I think I would be recommending there. And then there's other comments in here, but I wanted to talk a little bit more about the rhythm. So I'm just scrolling here to remind myself of things, and yeah, there was the opportunity for the third voice if there was going to be one. So let's talk about what's going on rhythmically and what that might mean. So reminds of a fugal section from a Beethoven sonata. Huh. Okay. Cool. So one of the things that typically happens in writing a fugue, really any any type of counterpoint in this style, which is essentially kind of a Baroque style, right, is that typically whatever rhythmic hook was in the subject, we obscure it later. I mean, that hook continues to come about, but at some point becomes a flood of eighth notes or 16th notes. And so if I compare that with David's Canon here, once we get to this point right here, we almost have no beats that don't have eighth notes. Eighth, there's quarter notes there. Well, I guess we do get them on the quarter notes. So I guess it is true that beat 1 is pretty well off in a quarter note. So that's actually, other than that one place where he added the eighth notes. And that's fine. I'm not saying it has to be this uninterrupted flow here, but we, even if there was a particular rhythmic kind of motif that was being developed, typically the other voices would be devised in a way that smooths that over. So when your when your answer comes in, instead of having the counter subject being quarter notes, more typically we would do things like this. I'm going to do a little surgery here, and I'm just going to do the simplest thing I can, which is add some neighbor tone figures to keep the motion going. All right, so I'm adding some motion in here, and I want you to hear this. Well, I should play it the way it was first. I'm going to play it again the way it was. Right, we're still very, very aware of bump, ba-da-dum, 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 right? The changes that I made are going to obscure that. So we're going to hear the bump, ba-da-dum, ba-da-dum, but then it's going to smooth out. So the bump, ba-da-dum, ba-da-dum is still there in the leader, in this, well, no, the follower, if this was a canon, but it's what we would call the answer in a fugue. That rhythm, ba-da-dum, 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 is still there, but it is being countered in the counter subject by something that just gives us a steadier flow of 16th notes. And typically, when writing a fugue, that's what you do. You design the accompanying material to the subject statements in a way that complements rhythmically, so that we don't continue to hear that motif as much. That's a Baroque approach. I would definitely say, and Trevor mentioning Beethoven, I would definitely say a classical approach might be to expose the bump da dum da dum a little bit more and not smooth it over as much as the Baroque version. I don't know. I'm making that up when I say that could be. I don't know. I'm just saying that this type of thing that you might do in the in this counter subject to cause the two together to add up to a more steady flow of things is common. Now, what's also common, though, is to say, you know what? In that first entry of the answer, I'm going to let the counter subject just have those quarter notes, so I still hear bump ba-da-dum ba-da-dum. But then in the third entrance of the third voice is when I will bring in some more stuff to fill things up. That, to me, would be the reason to bring in a third voice. If you wanted to keep the bump ba-da-dum ba-da-dum feel of this first reentrance, right here is where we would be bringing in a third voice with bump ba-da-dum, 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 and then maybe the first voice would not continue with that same rhythm, but would continue with something different there. So anyhow, that is not a none of these things are value statements or judgments. They're things about, well, what other composers do, what's considered typical in this style, and then you get to decide, do I want the typical or do I want to be me? You know, and I'm all for me being me, but I'm also for understanding what the sort of expectations are, and are they there for a reason? Is there value? Is there a reason why composers typically do that sort of thing? And are you losing anything by not doing it, or are you gaining something by not doing it? That's why having an awareness of convention is powerful, because then you know, am I going to gain something by holding on to that, or am I going to lose something? So, like, as a silly example, rhyming in poems, right? For years and years and years, everyone assumed you've always got to rhyme your poems. I don't know if that was literally true, but I mean, so many poems rhyme, and at some point in junior high school or whatever, you encounter your first poem that doesn't rhyme, and it blows your mind. How can this be a poem? It doesn't rhyme. And then you realize, okay, well, rhyming buys you certain things, and there's reasons to use that. And then deviating from the rhyming scheme buys you certain things, and there's reasons to do that as well. So, yeah, that's all stuff to think about. So I'm going to make sure I've undone all my changes here, so I'm not messing with this piece here anymore. But I do want to just call attention to one or two other things. Okay, so here, there's two things that I want to talk about harmonically. One is right here. At this point, bringing in the A natural, I was totally expecting A naturals here as well. It's like you've gone in one direction and now you're coming in another direction, and I want to hear, harmonically I'm talking about, now I want to hear this again. And then maybe this would want to stay natural. I don't know that I'm going to like this better, but... Oops, yeah, there's all sorts of A flats in there. But there's something about introducing a harmonic change in one direction and then countering it with a harmonic change in the other direction that also feels unexpected. And again, if that's what you're looking for, great. But there's a term that we use in counterpoint called a cross relation, where if you introduce a chromatic alteration in one voice, you don't counteract it in another voice, and that's kind of what's happening here. There's sort of like, rules or typical conventions that people follow about it. It's not like this, don't ever do this or only do it in here or there. It's a thing you think about. So I think I've fixed all of them now. I want to hear it again. Yeah, and now I feel like I'm ready for the A flat, because now it's moving in another direction. Anyhow, something to think about. There's a similar thing that happens moving to C minor. Going to the A flat's really nice. So here, this measure, you have basically a B natural. You're calling it C flat, but come on, you're going to C minor. Let's call it a B. Whoops, don't call it that. We'll call it a B. So you've got it. So that I'm going to call a B. But in the top voice, you have a B natural. I mean, a B flat. So this is giving you a crunch of these two notes against each other. And no, literally, we don't hear them at the same time, but orally we do. This is where things like the melodic minor scale come from. Raising those two pitches is perhaps a little more in keeping with the C minor feel. Don't like it. I think it's because I think it's about that A natural against that A flat now I'm not liking. So anyhow, it's the kind of thing that we might play with, like going up to a D and then coming back to a C. And of course, when I'm playing with notes in an imitative piece like this, you're playing with fire, because it means there's imitation that's going to happen. And if you change something here, you probably have to change something else a measure later. But I just want to hear it. So that has more of the expected sound, right? This is more the expected clear statement of a 5 chord in C minor going to C minor. The original version, so I'm going to play it this way again and then the original version so you can hear the difference. So that, I say, is harmonically clear. The original version is just a little less so. That B flat doesn't tell me as much about cadencing to C minor as that B natural did, but I have to change a lot of other things around it to make it work. So that was just another observation I wanted to make. Here you've got some interesting things going on, right? These leaps down, and this is forming a dissonance there. Beep. Like, I'm not sure why the A natural, and then leaping up to a dissonance, a fourth. So this is suddenly a much more dissonant passage than anywhere else, and it's not a problem, but it does feel a little out of character. Yeah, starting around here, the repetition of that line, bom ba-da-dum, ba-da-dum, feels out of character for everything else that's happening because we haven't had that level of repetition. Well, we sort of did, I guess. Dun, da, da, dun, da, da. Yeah, we did. But somehow it feels like I should be hearing something different against it. But yeah, I think it's maybe that the top part is also static. Da, da, da. And if it had gone up to an F, I might have felt less that way. But also the fact that I'm having this other sort of disrupting thing of leaping down into a dissonance, leaping up to another dissonance, and leaping by a dissonant interval while you're at it is sort of calling, it's a lot of things coming together to ask the ear to accept in those few beats. So that could be something also to think about. But I like the shape of that line. I just might want to think about whether there's a different way to finesse the pitches. Here, that G flat, whoops, felt like we've got an A diminished chord that I expected almost to come to a B flat minor, but that would have pulled us further away from the key. But that kind of thing can happen. Anyhow, those are some observations about this. There's lots of little details like that you could play with if you wanted to keep it more harmonically clear. But the way it's moving around between keys, I think, works just fine. It's just whether this specific note there or this specific note there tells that story the best way or not. All right, so there's some music for you. We'll look at some more music next time. By all means, if people have more to talk about with respect to memorization and understanding and all, be posting some stuff. Doesn't have to be an analysis. Could just be, here's a piece I want to talk about, and we can talk about it. So that said, I'm going to get on with some other business here. Other business meaning I made an announcement in the cafe yesterday and then posted to the community later that, there's some changes coming. One of them I might be able to put into place today or tomorrow or something, and so some stuff's coming. I just got my work cut out for me making all the technical things happen. So, interesting. BSG did one. Oh, yeah, I would be very interested to see. He's probably got some of the same stuff and then some other stuff too. But yeah, that guy's awesome. All right, thanks everyone for being here. Thanks for bearing with me at the beginning when there was I had my other microphone on unbeknownst to me. And thanks for all the music, and we'll talk again. See you later.